Hello, comic creators. In this episode of the Comics Industry Commentary, we look at the struggles that Grendel is having on Netflix. We look at the struggles of independent publishers paying page rates, and we look at another move in the management structure of independent comics. My name is Gamal Hennessy, and I am an attorney, author, and business consultant specializing in the comic book industry. So we're going to actually take a look at the major news stories for the week leading into New York Comic Con. The first story comes to us from the pages of Deadline, and it talks about how the independent comic book series, Grendel, was in the middle of production when Netflix decided to simply pull the whole show. So now there was going to be a show of a long-running independent comic book franchise that's no longer going to happen, at least not on Netflix. The way the deal is structured, the way Deadline describes it, the show can move to another network, but at this point, the entire thing is in limbo. Now, if you're a comic creator and you're looking to actually make a deal for Netflix or make a deal for movies or anything like that, I've talked a lot on this channel about the maybe movie model and how you cannot rely on having a movie deal if you want to be in the comic book business. Now, that's not the situation with Grendel. Grendel is Matt Wagner, and Grendel has been in the comic book business for more than 30 years. But the idea that once you actually sign a Netflix deal, then the race is over and you've won and everything is fine is not actually the case, as this example clearly shows. You could get a Netflix deal, you can get an option, you can have that option go into development, you can have that development of that product go into production, and that still does not mean you're going to see a TV show on the screen. Now, hopefully, Grendel will find a new home, and we will all get to see the exploits of this character on the screen. But if you are making comics, do not make comics with the hopes that the only way you're going to make money is if you make a TV show or a movie, because that TV show or that movie may not come. We're actually doing a panel for New York Comic Con specifically on comics to movies and the legal process surrounding how that works, but I'll go into that a little bit later on in this program. Let's move on to the next story. The next story is by a gentleman named Todd Allen, and it talks about the economics of page rates for independent comic book publishers. Now, if you're not familiar with Todd Allen, he actually wrote this very fine book called The Economics of Digital Comics that I highly recommend you read if you want to understand the foundations of how distributing and publishing comics in digital format actually works. This is very good. The book is very good for a foundation, even though it is a few years old and is probably due for an update. But what Mr. Allen actually talked about in the article that I'm going to list in the show notes is how you have to take a look at the rates that independent publishers can pay for creative, where it's art, writing, lettering, coloring, in light of the fact of the cost that they have to produce. Because a independent publisher does not get the same discounts for printing that a larger publisher does. The larger the publisher, the more books you're publishing, and the greater volume discount you can get on the printing. That volume discount translates directly into more revenue on the back end when you're actually talking about profit. If you're not getting those discounts, then the amount that you actually need to pay to have each book printed, shipped, and delivered to your customer is going to be higher, which actually draws revenue away from every place else that you have to pay, including the page rates you have to pay for your talent. So when you're talking about being an independent publisher and you're talking about how you're going to manage to pay people what they're worth, pay people something competitive so they'll actually want to work with you, but at the same time, control your costs in terms of everything else you have to pay for, whether that's printing, marketing, distribution, or whatever, you have to take a very clear look at what your break-even number is going to be. Break-even number, obviously, is the amount of whatever you're selling that you have to sell to cover all your costs. Because if you can't cover those costs so that everything after that break-even is profit, it is very difficult for you to actually maintain your business and keep it running. The article actually talks about print runs for independent comics around the 5,000 mark, because that is where a lot of independent comics fall. But you have to actually understand or figure out a way through all of your different distribution channels, whether that's direct market, bookstore, library, convention, direct to consumer, digital, how you're going to aggregate all of those different distribution channels to get way past that $5,000 number, because it's the 5,000 unit number where a lot of people are struggling. If you can get to 10,000, if you can get to 15,000, anything that you can get to actually make the pie bigger means that you can actually pay people more and you have a better chance of succeeding in the long term, even if you're not making, you're not selling hundreds of thousands of copies. It's the break-even number and the amount that you can actually use to get to be more profitable that you're going to have to strive for. The third story actually came down this morning. Mike Martz, the longtime editor for the Batman line over at DC, the X-Men line over at Marvel, and who spent the last 8 years as editor-in-chief of AfterShock, is leaving AfterShock as of today to pursue other interests that have not been named as of yet. Now, whenever we talk about a individual in the comic book industry moving, you have to understand how that impacts you as a individual comic creator, whether you're looking for creator-owned deals or you're looking for freelance deals. The industry is small, and as people move, your opportunities change based on the relationships that you have. So let's say you didn't necessarily have an in with AfterShock because you didn't know anyone there. Well, if Martz leaves and goes somewhere else, AfterShock has to find a new editor-in-chief. That new person may be someone you have a better chance of connecting with, or you already have a connection with them, where now the doors at AfterShock might start to open up for you. Conversely, if someone like Martz or someone who was working with Martz is no longer at that company, then you have to actually make sure that you still have a decent relationship with that company. Or did your situation suddenly change so you now have to reposition yourself to either follow that individual where he winds up or reestablish your connection with that company through some other individual? So these moves don't necessarily impact you if you're making independent comics and you're not necessarily bringing in people or moving people around based on what's happening with other people in the industry. But like I said, if you're trying to get a creator-owned deal, you're trying to get a freelance deal, all of these moves can impact what your opportunities are based on your relationships with these people as they move. The last thing that I want to talk about, which I will put on the screen, is going to be my schedule for New York Comic Con this year. I am going to be on Thursday. Thursday, I am going to be at a panel called Hero at Law, which is actually teaching attorneys how to represent clients in the comic book space. Now, that's going to be a continuing legal education program, which means you have to pay more to get a ticket to get into this thing. So if you're not an attorney trying to represent comic book clients, you can probably skip it. But if you are, it is going to be something that's worth paying attention to. At 2 o'clock, I'm going to be moderating a panel on Kickstarters in 2022 and the developments in that space as it pertains to independent and emerging publishers. On Friday, like I mentioned before, there's going to be a panel all about what happens when a comic book transitions into a film from a legal standpoint. We're going to have a very experienced team of attorneys there to actually walk you through that entire process. And then on Sunday, there will be another continuing legal education panel specifically about drafting and negotiating contracts for clients who are in the comic book business. Again, you're going to have to pay extra for that. But if you're an attorney who wants CLE credit and wants to go to Comic-Con, there's worse ways to actually get in. So you should check it out if you're available. So that's going to do it for this week's comics industry commentary. I will leave all of the links to all the stories that I talked about in the show notes. I will also leave links to my website if you need a legal consultation for something that you're working on. Keep in mind, if you reach out to me next week, I'm not going to get back to you really fast because it's going to be Comic-Con. And I will also leave a link to our ongoing business educational program, Comics Publishing Institute, so that you can join that as well. And there will also be a discount code in the show notes that you can use. So until then, have fun with your comic. Oh, by the way, there's not going to be another one of these next week because on Friday, I'll be running around Comic-Con, obviously. Thanks.